All right, we're at the end of the session. Now let's see if I can get these names right. This is Apollo, this is Coach, and why am I forgetting her name?
Bailey.
Bailey.
Bailey. Well, because I didn't work with you as much, I think is why. Because you're the best behaved dog, Bailey. Okay, so this is the roadmap to success. Now, at the end of the session, we actually spent a lot of time talking about Coach here, and I think Coach has a resource guarding problem. So I gave the Guardian a lot of tips for helping that. She talked to, unfortunately, a couple of dog trainers who use the old way of training, which was like, oh, you can't let the dog get away with growling at you. A growl is a warning. We should never, ever, ever correct a dog for growling. Now, I might want to adjust the reason the dog thinks it's appropriate to growl in the first place, and that's a lot of the stuff we went over in the session. Now, I've got a handful of treats here, so I'm just trying to keep them occupied. But if you have a dog with a resource guarding, dogs can guard a person, a location, or an object. A lot of times they do food, but they can also do a kennel, which it sounds like one of Coach's issues. So when you have a resource guarding situation and you confront the dog or try to force or take something, you're going to make it much, much worse. So what we want to do instead is we want to show the dog that when a human approaches, they're not here to take your stuff. Matter of fact, they're going to make your situation better. So one of the situations, the guardian who's filming this actually sometimes I believe is guarded by Coach a little bit. So let's say they're in a room and this is a hallway and the doorway to the room is right here. Well, if the person walks in the room and he growls, he's saying, I'm guarding him. Well, the person should immediately leave, go get a high-value treat or a handful of them, and then leave the room completely, and then walk by, and as they walk by the entrance, just toss one treat at the dog and keep walking. So the idea is we want to toss a treat from far enough away where the dog doesn't perceive to be a threat. So let's say that when she comes in the room, she ate that's probably over these. And that was a good communication. We prefer not to have that happen at all. Okay. Sit. Hey. Nope. Come here. So we want to always increase distance whenever we have dogs that are having issues like that. Sit. And I asked them to do something different. Nope. I don't want this to happen at the end of a session. Come here, buddy. I don't want to have it happen ever, but especially not when we're filming this. And you are not helping right now. That's all right. There we go. Okay. There you go. And we're going to do two more, and then we'll be done. Sit. Well, that's not a sit. You may sit. Okay, now we're done, so there's nothing left to guard. So if your dogs do get into a disagreement like that, we want to make sure we're increasing the distance between the two of them. So I'm going to talk real quick. This is something we didn't talk about at all, but I'll go ahead and talk about it right now because it's kind of apropos. So some of the warnings that dogs give. Most of us, when we react to a dog, is when the dog is actually lunging, barking, or growling, and that's way too late. What we want to do instead is we want to recognize the dog's body language. I'm going to try to get in more of a comfortable position. So a stare, either directly at the camera or at the dog, or staring like this, looking away, are usually the first warning signs. So if you see one of your dogs start staring at another dog or staring at another reason, or another direction, we want to kind of identify what's going on. And we can use the focus exercise that we went through, or come some sort of a stopgap measure. So we want to redirect the dog into something else, and then once it's done with something else, we can reward it. And we want to always increase the distance if dogs are reactive to another dog or a person or whatever it is. Sometimes you have to move the dog completely out of its purview so it can't even see. All right, so other indicators would be a licking of the lips. Often if they're trying to touch their nose, that can mean I'm stressed out. Oh, he's trying to get the ball. I was using the first escalating consequence, and it worked a little bit. Okay, so staring is the first indicator. Freezing is also a big warning. Breathing heavily or holding the breath. Pupils dilating, it's more of a sign of excitement. Tail wagging, it's really more where it is. See how his tail right now is almost parallel with the spine, it's going up a little bit, it's got a curl. I'm just looking at this part, not the curling part. Ideally, we'd like to see the tail like this, parallel with the spine. That's a great example of a calm, balanced dog. If a dog puts its tail up and it's going straight up or it's standing straight up, that's a warning as well. Hackles going up is a warning. Ears coming forward or going way back are warnings. So if you see any of these things, then I want to look around the situation. So if we catch the dog at a stare and then we change the environment to take care of whatever problem is for the dog, okay, I don't have to go to the next level, next level, next level. Most of us wait until the dog is lunging. At that point, just like two humans having an argument, it's much more intense. So if we can learn to recognize the warning signs and redirect the dog's attention at that point, we'll be able to head things off before they actually happen. So I don't like using a clap, but the guardians have used a clap a couple times, so I've used it because it's what the dogs are used to, but I like to use the clap to get the dog to come to me. Okay, let's talk about some other stuff we went over in the session. I'd like each dog to have a naughty dog name, and so that way we can, anytime the dog's doing something inappropriate, we can use a naughty dog name and not create negative association with their actual given name. Now he, I think, has learned to growl as a way of communicating with people, and I think part of it might be the resource guarding, part of it might be a habit, but he also likes to mark. And he marks the second way of marking, which is by rubbing himself on the furniture or the people. We have to disagree with that. We want to disagree using the escalating consequences, provided the dog is not being aggressive about it. If the dog's being aggressive, he's marking me, and I hiss at him and he growls, I would get up and leave the room, the fourth quadrant of operant conditioning. I'm deducting something from the equation, in this case, my presence. But we need to, if you see him doing this, usually the marking is not going to be an aggressive behavior, but if I let him rub himself against my leg, he's trying to make me smell like him so that the other dogs know that he's in charge. And I think this is a big issue that I think the reason these two have gotten into it a couple times is I think the dogs, and also profuse licking can also be a third way of marking, which she was just doing. And for dogs, anything they're doing when we pet them is what we're reinforcing. Anything that they do in our presence that we don't disagree, we're giving 2 thumbs up to. So if we see the dog marking the chair and we don't disagree, the dog's like, yeah, they're cool with that. So we need to make sure we disagree right away. Remember, you have 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog for them to have the ability to make the connection. But it has to be repeated enough with good consistency for them to make that association. Come. That's passive training. We'll talk about that in a second. Come. Now, you can see also not a lot of respect for personal space. And I think part of this is because every time the dogs nudge or invade the dog's guardian's personal space, they reach over and pet them. So one of the things I went over was petting with a purpose. So if she comes over and nudges me, let's see if she'll do it. Sit. Sit. So he's the only one that sat, so he's the only one that got attention. One of the questions I asked the guardians if make sure she's fair with all the dogs, they all get a treat? Yes. Well, that's really not a great idea unless we have a specific reason to do that, and most people don't have that. They think we're being mean. But if I ask the dog to sit, one sits and the other 2 don't, and I give them all a treat, well, what's the dog that did the right things, motivation to continue working? So, or doing the right thing. So what I do, I like the guardians to do this, is occasionally pull out a treat and say come or sit or down or whatever it is, and whoever does it first gets the treat. Whoever does the second and third doesn't get anything. Now, if you get 2 dogs doing it at the same time, I would reward both of those dogs. So maybe have 2 treats or 3 treats. But eventually the dogs will start competing to be obedient. Right now they're competing for attention, really competing to be disobedient. So one of the things, to help the guardians with that, I went over what I call passive training and petting with a purpose. Petting with a purpose is if the dog nudges me like this and I pet it, I'm telling the dog, yes, you're the boss of me. When you tell me what to do, I jump. So instead, if the dog nudges me or scratches it, I would say sit. Sit. And then I pet the dog under his chin. Come. Even though she sat there, she came, and that's a harder deal, so I'm rewarding her for that. But now we're going to start petting and giving the dogs attention when they do things that we want, or we direct them into doing something we want. So they tell us what to do, nothing happens. We tell them what to do, and they do it, they get a reward, they get a benefit. They're now motivated to want to do those things. It also changes their perception. I can't tell the humans what to do, come. I have to ask the humans what to do. And what will happen, come, is the dogs will start doing what I call passive or prepaying for attention. So the dog will come and, those are very polite ears, by the way, when they work for a second. If you see the ears kind of like, she's a lab, so she's got squared off ears. When they're kind of turned so the inside of the ear is facing the cheek, that's a little bit more subdued. When they're like face forward, which is what she had, when you rewind this, you'll see them that we're facing forward. That's like a very respectful, very demure, I'm not trying to challenge you, a very humble sort of body language mechanic for a dog. Okay, so for petting with a purpose, I don't want the guardians to pet the dogs for no reason. I want them to ask the dog to sit, come, lay down. If it's sitting here, ask it to come and sit over here. And especially the dog nudges or paws for attention. If we reward the dog for doing that, it's going to continue doing that. If we do this enough, and so we're going to say paycheck, if we think that somebody's petting the dog without a purpose. I come in the room, see somebody's petting a dog that's standing, I'm assuming they forgot, because we forget often. And so I would tell the person paycheck, that person stops petting, we tell the dog to sit. When it sits, we pet it on the chin to say the word sit. Then we tell the other person, I asked him to sit before he came in the room, he didn't see it. Now, if I ask the dog to sit, once it sits, I can pet it for 8 hours after that. Or the dog can come up and prepay by sitting to ask for attention. And if it does that, dogs are struggling to get a ball that's on the chair. Anyways, that's fine. But if the dog comes and sits in front of me, and then I pet it, and I say the word sit or come, like I was doing here, now I'm telling the dogs this is an action that will get attention from the human. For dogs, it's validated to get a human's attention. Good attention and bad attention are pretty much the same thing. And most of us train our dogs to misbehave because that's when they get attention from us. So instead, what we do is when the dog comes up and organically comes to me, I'm going to pet it and say come. It lays down, I'm going to pet it and say crash. It sits, I'm going to pet it and say sit. Even though the dog knows these things, and this seems super, super simplistic, come. It has a profound impact. It's one of the easiest ways you can train a dog. Now, passive training is, like I said, waiting for the dog to do the activity and rewarding it. Petting with a purpose is giving the dog a direction. If you just want to pet it for no reason, or if the dog is demanding attention from you. So I would also say recognize, reward, or maybe testify. If you see somebody, the dog just did something, it could be rewarded, and our partner or our friend missed it, we say reward. The dog, I just turn to look at the dog, it's sitting, I'm going to pet it and say sit. Just narrate whatever it's doing. It's standing, come. I'm assuming it just came, and pet it and say come. All right, now we also went over the importance of rules. The Guardians had some rules in place, but I would recommend some additional rules, such as this is kind of the main hangout room. We have a table that's normally in front of the couch where the dog is, or our coach is right now. If the Guardians are eating on this table, then we would not allow the dogs to walk on the carpet while we're eating. The rest of the time they can come and go, but not while we're eating. Dogs should not be within 7 feet of a human who's eating, as that's inappropriate. It's a way of challenging for that food or that item. So another rule would be the dog has to sit before we let it in or out of the door. If the dog doesn't, if I go to the door and say sit, the dog doesn't sit, I can't let you lick me profusely. I think she might be like OCD about licking, but it's possible that she's licking to mark. Right there, you can pet her and say come. Come. So for the door, I go to the door and I say sit. Sit. Now that was longer than 3 seconds. I would say sit, and the dog sits within 3 seconds, I open the door. If it doesn't, I would walk away, sit down somewhere, wait for 1 minute, then go back to the door and again say sit. You're doing a great job. Come. If the dog doesn't sit that time within 3 seconds, I walk away this time for 2 minutes, next time for 4 minutes, then for 8 minutes, and I keep on doubling the length of time until when I go to the door and say sit, that dog sits its butt down. As soon as it does, I open that door like there's a remote control in their butt. Down. Flop. So that's 2. My flight down is, anyways. So the more that we reward the dogs for these desired behaviors and ask the dog for enforcing rules for the door, if I go to the door, if I want to go out as a dog, I'm going to go to the door and sit down, because when I sit down, that means the door opens. And at first I do with whatever direction the dog wants to go. If it wants to go outside, I start with an inside, but eventually I do it both directions. Now we have 3 dogs here. If I say sit and he sits and the other 2 dogs don't sit, I would let him out and not let the other 2 dogs out. Another rule would be the dog's not allowed to be in the kitchen when we're preparing food. Now, the only time that we wouldn't use the escalating consequences, like we just got done talking about off camera, is if the dog is guarding. So if coach is in here and somebody has food and he starts growling and doing the resource guarding, that is one time we would not want to make him leave. What we would have the person do is eating and pick up his food and actually leave the area, close the door behind him. And we would want to methodically practice desensitizing him so he no longer thinks it's appropriate to guard the person or needed to guard the person. Let me see. And also, when we're doing these things, we can do warm-ups. So if we're going to eat here, maybe before we bring out our actual food, we got a piece of roast beef, we microwave it for about 30 seconds, bring it back, cut it in half, and we put it on each other's plate, and we practice cutting it up in little pieces. Fire truck right outside, parking right in front. It's not us, I swear, it's not me. But basically, once the dog tries to come across the boundary, we correct, and we use the third escalating consequence, move the dog across. Once the dog sits or lies down, then we can actually put the roast beef away and bring our actual Chipotle out or La Casa or whatever it is and eat our actual meal. We help the dog practice the behavior first. And then once the dog was doing what we want or performing well, then we do the real world situation after they've warmed up. Let me see, what else do we go over? Walking or increasing exercise, I should say. The dogs do a good job of, the Guardians do a good job of exercising the dogs, but we'd like to see them getting more exercise. Your average dog needs 45 minutes of exercise a day. Probably more for the 2 younger dogs and less than the old girl, but they all benefit from that. Now, I went through in the video above how to teach him to fetch, and fetch is a great way to do it. The exercise journal, if the Guardians keep that, they should write down the time and the number of fetches, the time and the length of walk, the time and the number of revolutions around the room with the laser, or whatever it is. And then at the end of the day, and do that for each dog, and at the end of the day, give each dog an A, B, C, D, or F grade. And then the next day, play around with the variables. And eventually we'll find the right combination of exercise where all the dogs are sufficiently depleted and feel good and comfortable. And you should see a decrease in a lot of the behaviors. It won't help with the resource guarding, but some of the other behaviors it will certainly help with. And also for your journal, make sure you write other things. If there's a resource guarding incident, make sure you write down the time, where you were, what was going on, was it before I fed, after I fed, was there a fire truck across the street, or whatever it was, and put as much detail in there as possible. Try to do this for a month. A lot of my clients say, yeah, and they don't do it. But when you have dogs with behavior problems and we can start seeing a trend, that information is invaluable when it comes to rehabilitating a dog with a behavior problem. Let me see, what else? In the videos above, we went over kind of some exercises that will help the dogs develop some self-control. We went over it just with Apollo, but we could probably do it with all three of the dogs. I actually like the Guardians to do it with all three of the dogs. The more that we practice things, again, another fire truck showed up. The more that we practice these things, just like humans, we have more and more skills, our self-esteem and our confidence levels go up. So the oldest dog, I think, is probably she's a little insecure. She gave me some indications that she's a little insecure. The other dogs have issues, but they're not insecurity issues. And so anyways, the more that we can teach our dogs the more commands and skills they know, the better, the more confident they'll be. Just like humans, most insecure dogs are often the ones with the biggest problems. In this case, it's not the case. These two dogs are really more problematic than she is. She's a really well-behaved dog. But building up and boosting her self-esteem and confidence will really help. Now, she does have a couple issues. She is afraid of thunderstorms as well as fireworks. Now, in May, we're going to actually do a class at Doggone Problems where we're going to actually teach people how to counter-condition their dog and help them no longer be fearful of fireworks. That might be something we might want to look into for her, signing her up for it. But in the meantime, this is the spring. It's supposed to snow this weekend, but after this, we're probably going to get a lot of thunderstorms. Well, the dog goes and cowers somewhere, that kind of amplifies it. So what I'd like the Guardians to do in the future is every time there's a thunderstorm, put on a rain jacket, a cap, and then take her out for like a 30-minute walk in the thunderstorm. Dogs get over things by literally moving forward. So the more that we get her moving forward and she's exposed to it and nothing bad happens, after a while she's like, thunderstorm. And she doesn't cower, and we can help her so she doesn't tremble in fear every time it rains. We're here in Nebraska, it does it a lot. Come. Another good example of passive training. Sit. You have a very cute underbite. Can you give me a kiss? No kisses, huh? Okay. Sit. 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 I repeated it there. Don't repeat commands. Say it once and then make it happen. Sit. But the more that we pet with the purpose and we passive training, the more they're going to do those things. Now, one thing with Coach is I do notice when he gets a little bit, he kind of slows down and kind of does the freezing thing. That's, I think, his big warning. So if we recognize him doing that, we recognize that. And again, we don't want to run away, but we want to increase the distance if possible. Let me see. So yeah, that dominance move. So don't put it down. Just pull your arm back. So she was petting him, and she went like that. So and she kind of pushed the arm back, and the dog just kept coming back for it. So instead, what we do is we retract, and the dog is putting its chin on her knee. Well, she could hiss at that, or she could immediately leave the room. Now, we think it's cute, and we can actually use passive training to teach a dog to do that on command. So every time the dog does that, maybe we say beg or chin and pet the dog. Now, that's for the short term, so we can teach the dog to do that command on command. But after a while, then we would not want to reward that behavior because, again, we're rewarding the dog for unbalanced behaviors. Now, remember, anything your dog is doing when you pet it is what you're reinforcing and amplifying, including unbalanced states of mind like nervous, anxious, excited, fearful. So if your dog is nervous, you can touch the dog and let the dog know I'm here with you without amplifying. But as soon as you start petting, you're going to amplify it. Now also come up with a list of command words and say just the specific command word. I talked about in the video above, each dog should have its own release word for the stay. And I think the stay is really going to be beneficial. I'd like to see the Guardians practicing and mastering the stay so we can put the dogs in a sit stay while we're feeding them and doing other things. Remember, for feeding, we're going to feed the dogs only after the human who's feeding them eats something first. Doesn't have to be a real meal, just 5 more bites. Then we're going to feed the female first. Then Maya? I forgot. Meryl. No, her name.
Oh, Bailey.
Bailey. There we go. Bailey first, and then Coach, and then Apollo, because Apollo's the newest dog, and we want to kind of have structured order. And this just is something we're going to do every day. So if the dogs see us eat first, and then we only let one dog in the room at a time, then the dog's going to see and respect us a little bit more as authority figures. Now, the only time I would want to pull the plug on this is if Coach starts getting growly or aggressive during that, then we might need to revisit that and work on some other things. Remember to message me if you do have any trips coming up with as much notice as you can. If you do want to have Lydia, our puppy trainer, who also does dog sitting, if you want to have her come and sit and watch the dog, make sure you let us know as soon as possible so we can block up those dates. And we want to practice having her come over and meet the dogs a couple times before that actually happens, so it's a good, amicable situation. All right, am I forgetting anything? The focus exercise, when we practice, focus in all the exercises, actually I forgot, I remember a couple things, but I have to move my feet or I'm going to be asleep for hours. We want to practice in different locations. Don't just practice in one location. Dogs don't generalize well, so we need to practice in a whole bunch of different locations so they can do the activity all over. That's why Petting with a Purpose and Passive Training is so helpful. We do it all over the place. Let me see. The focus exercise, usually when I do it, I have about 10 to 12 treats in my left hand, and I hold it here, then one treat in my right hand, and I hold it here. Now, I would probably do it with all three dogs, so when you say focus, all three of them learn to stop and look up at us, but do it with them separately. Now, first I do it with 12 treats, and so 1 second, 1 second. I didn't actually finish this, going through this, I'm glad I'm going through it here. So once I do this, and the dog gets to the point where it's pretty much just staring at me, then I go 1 second, 2 seconds on the second movement for all 12 treats. And then the next guardian would practice 1 second, 2 seconds on the second movement. The first movement to our nose is always 1 second. Second movement is only is whatever we're up to. We want to progressively get it up to the point where we can go 1 second, up to 15 or 20 seconds on that second movement, and the dog is still focused on our eyes. Remember, anytime like the stay or any of these exercises, if the dog gets distracted, looks away, then back up to the number you were at previously before the dog moved, and then practice that one over and over again. I'd like the guardians to get up to like a 15-second focus within 7 days. The dog will get a little bit bored of practicing this one, so you really want to do this one about each guardian maybe 3 to 5 times a day with each dog. And that seems like a lot, but it's only going to be a week, and after a week you say focus and they just stop what they're doing and look up at you. Come. All right, Bailey, see I remember it eventually. Oh, one other thing is personal space. This is something we didn't really talk about during the session. But if dogs have 3 levels of space. There's intimate space, which is like a 3-foot bubble. 3 feet to 9 feet is considered social space. 9 for, I guess, about 11 feet. So 3 feet to 11. And then anything beyond 11 feet, right there is a sit. Now I'm going to talk about one other thing. Come is public space. And they're, just like us, they're more particular who comes in their personal space. I like the guardians to get in the habit of defining a 1-foot bubble of personal space. If you want to invite the dog in your lap, that's one thing, or to get close. But if the dog's doing that and I'm petting and rewarding it, I'm training the dog to do that. Now, I'm going to see if it happens again. So Bailey was right here, and Apollo came and inserted himself in between her and her guardian, and is trying to take attention. Now, and I remember 2 things. So if that's the case, we don't want to allow her to continue doing that, or him to do that. So if that happens again, I might hook his collar and hold him off to the side. And if I'm petting one dog and the second dog comes up and I stop and I pet both dogs, now I'm letting the second dog steal from the first dog. So I'm petting one, actually, Bailey. Well, I'll show you this way. So I'm petting Bailey. Well, let's say I'm petting Apollo, and then Bailey comes over. There we go. Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold her off to the side, and I'm going to continue petting him as much as I want. When I get done petting him, if she doesn't protest, then I would give her my full attention. If she protested, then I would not give her any attention. And right now, I was just going to show you her ear. She had the forward ear deal that I was talking about earlier. Now, I'm pushing the dog away, and this is what most people do, and they see what's happening as the dog comes back for more. Dogs really want to push each other when they're playing. So what we'd want to do is we want to increase our elevation standing up or hissing before the dog got to us. Remember to use those 4 escalating consequences in order, so you're always going to start with the hiss. Unless this is coach being aggressive, then we wouldn't want to use those. We want to leave or redirect his attention towards something else. Come here, buddy. Sit. Sit. This is Apollo. This is Bailey, and this is their roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.